hey, Solomon Nelson, like, we're training at 3 o'clock today. And you said, oh my gosh, like, we're going to train. Okay, cool. We do that for a week. And then next week you don't show up.
You've never met anyone with as much willpower as me. Whatever it is you think you're good at in your life, it'd probably take about a year and become an authority in the field in which you think you're good. Greg Doucette, who is a two-faced, lying sociopath sucker. Print that. If I had just listened to almost any coach and done what they have said, then the probability that I'd have higher success is greater than I've had up until now.
I'm bigger and stronger than Mike Menzer. That's it.
I have the utmost respect for Lyle.
Lyle McDonald, we need your help.
I'm just better than you, Lyle, so Lyle can go f himself.
I've known athletes like this before. They are uncoachable.
I've been up since 2 a.m. I made a strong cuppa. I think a caffeinated, sleep-deprived Solomon is going to make for a better interviewer.
Yeah.
So we'll see how we go. Yeah, always.
Sounds good.
How you going, guys?
Good. Glad to be here.
Greg?
I have a hard time answering that because it's so good that I don't want to say how good it is because I feel bad that the person's asking and I have to say an answer that's so amazing that I don't want to feel bad. Like my life is so good that it's like a 10 out of 10 ridiculous.
Okay, fine. I didn't sleep well last night, so I'm tired and punchy. So I'm going to use my bad mood. I'm not in a bad mood, but I'm just not. Like I said, I've got enough caffeine in my system to kill a moose.
My bad days are amazing. My bad day is just like bang.
There's worse things that could happen, dude.
Shall I introduce you both? The two juggernauts I'm joined by.
I guess. I mean, I think people probably know
Mike
who we are.
Best friends.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk Mike Israetel. A few years ago, he entertained a hypothetical scenario on a now deleted podcast with Stephen DeVos, the lifting dermatologist. The hypothetical scenario was this. Whom would I rather be coached by? Lyle McDonald or Greg Doucette? Mike used the opportunity to slander the pair of you. Imagine all the different ways things could go wrong with either of you as his coach. Well, now, thanks to this podcast, Mike no longer has to imagine, because among other things, we're going to examine how each of you would coach him, if at all. I'd also like to critically examine the 3 reasons that Mike himself recently gave on a podcast with the Brazilian bodybuilder Simeo Lamero, I hope I'm not butchering that name, as to why he's uncoachable.
Hi.
Gentlemen?
Okay.
Sound good?
Great. Shall we get stuck into Mike's first reason for why he's uncoachable?
Sure.
Reason number 1 is that he knows his particular body and situation and drug response way better than anyone else does, so most generic protocols work suboptimally for him.
One problem is that I know my particular body and situation and response to drugs way better than anybody else does. And so most of the conventional dosing and compound assumptions will work suboptimally for me.
Well, he thinks he knows his body more than anyone else. He wishes he did. He believes it to be true. And so in his perception of reality, that's true. But for everyone else's perception of reality, it's ridiculous. There's no way he could know more than everyone else. But how do you convince him that this is true? And if you did try to convince him it was true, he would get sublime pleasure and try to explain how you're absolutely wrong. He would find a way to say there's no way that you could ever be right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the kind of person, like, he would basically go out of his way to prove you wrong by not listening and screwing it up. So they go, see, I told you didn't know better. Now, what I would add to that is whenever I hear people, well, okay, look, I'm sure Dorian knew his body better than anyone. He won 8 Mr. Olympias. Like, when someone says, I know my body better, and they're winning, I would probably take that at face value, although most of them usually had a great coach. I mean, guarantee you Ed Cohn knew his body better than anyone, and he still had a coach. But whenever I hear the average bodybuilder, and Greg, I'm sure you've heard this, who go, oh, I know my body better than anyone, it's an excuse to do stupid BS in the gym. They're doing some goofy crap in the gym, whether it's an exercise or training part, you know, dude, there's probably, oh, I know my body better. Like, all right, cool story. Like, it's usually a defense for that. Building on what you said, if Mike truly knew his body better than anyone, wouldn't he have gotten in shape by now? I mean, it's kind of a simple thing, except that when you're like Mike and refuse to accept, I mean, as you know, it was really just the tan, and that was the company, even though he didn't listen to their protocol. It was the tan that held him back. But so far as the generic protocol thing is a total straw man. When I've coached people, when you've coached people, have you ever used a generic protocol with anybody? No, you figure out the individual, you figure out the athlete, you figure out what their needs are. Some of it's trial and error initially on. Neither you nor I have ever used a quote unquote generic protocol with anyone we worked on individually. But that's just one of Mike's, I couldn't respond to a generic protocol. Maybe he should try generic dieting, you know, that's worked for everybody else. Anyway.
The funny thing is, he wouldn't need a really good coach to help him. He literally could get a bottom of the barrel, cheap, first-time coach with no experience, and they could coach him better than he can coach himself. Like, he doesn't need an expert. He doesn't need me to say, well, Masterone does this. You can take this and that and that. He doesn't need any of that. He just needs somebody to say, stop eating cereal.
Right. He needs
like,
someone
it's that simple.
One of the best diets, this is back in my 20s, and I made the same mistakes. I'm like, I know what I'm doing. And I would just be like, oh, I'm going to experiment with this and do things I would never let anyone else do. And I just asked some people, this old Usenet days, I said, hey, once a week, just ask me if I'm sticking to the plan. That alone, the accountability to prevent me from being my own worst enemy, was all that I required to get the results that I could get in anybody else. Right? My own coach, when I was speed skating, said he loved going to other coaches' workouts because he didn't have to think. You just let someone, like, to your point, who's moderately competent, who can say, this is how bodybuilders have dieted for 50 years. You're not special, Mike. You're not a unique flower. Just do this. And
even just having a coach to make sure you're at the proper amount of conditioning each week out. I could literally have an athlete. I know my body better than everyone. I want to do this. Okay. Show me a photo of yourself at 16 weeks out and every week till the show. And I'll tell you whether or not you're in enough of a deficit to meet your, you know, your conditioning requirements, and be like, hey, looks great. Keep doing what you're doing. Great. Wait, the last 2 weeks, you haven't gotten any leaner. Right. You need to pick up the pace.
Yeah.
You can add more cardio. You can take out food. You do it.
Whatever.
You know your body more than me. I'm just telling you, at this pace, you're going to look like horrible at the show. Do something. I've done that before.
Sure. I mean, it's as much as anything, because, like, let's face it, you can't be objective about your own physique or perform. Like, you just can't, unless you have a really, really good ability to step outside yourself. And let's face it, most of us don't. People come to my Facebook group and go, hey, I'm doing a show in 3 months. And I'll just go, you're not going to make it. Right. You know, as well as I do, beginners underestimate their starting body fat and they overestimate how fast they're going to lose. And I'm like, pick a show 6 months from now and you might make it. Or if you prep them and they fall behind, you know, to your point, you know where they kind of need to be. Especially, point I make frequently is physique athletes are different, well, in a lot of ways, than Gen Pop, right? Gen Pop doesn't have a goal to reach their fat. A physique athlete has to be in shape at 9 a.m. on Saturday, whatever the date is, right? They don't, being there a week later is not useful. And if they're not on schedule, you either have to tell them to drop out then or get them back on schedule. Solomon and I talked about that. I'm like, had I been coaching Mike, knowing, because what was his constant refrain? Oh, you know, I needed 5 more weeks of dieting. Well, good Lord, why didn't you start 5 weeks earlier next time? And it's usually closer to 2 months. If I had someone like that, I'm like, all right, 2 weeks, you're going to suffer. I'm going to make you do, you know, protein spirit, like low calorie. We got to get you back on schedule, because if we don't do it now, you know, or if you're working with a propped athlete, go, cool, double your, you know, or whatever it is, like whatever. You can do that from the outside. The athlete usually can't, unless they're Dorian and they're so experienced. But I mean, I realize Mike is better and stronger than Mike Mentzer. Lol.
Oh,
Jesus. But he's not. right? When you're a successful athlete, you can do that because you have learned what works. And when you're Mike, he hasn't even learned what doesn't work because he keeps doing the same thing over and over and over again.
You know, Mike could have had the internet coach him. Like if he had just showed, here's my progress photos, everyone, and just did this, just been like, what do you think, guys? 6 weeks out, do I look okay? And it'd be like, what the comments would have been like, no. Like I thought I made a video on him and he said he was competing. I thought it was a mock show. I thought he was pretending to compete and just trying to see a new diet. And then he ended up at the show because you visually see him in the shirt like this. And I'm like, I don't see things happening that would be of somebody who's in contest shape.
Shall we move on to reason number 2? I'll let you finish, Lyle, but after
one
that,
more thought,
one
more thought, then we'll move on. And again, I'm sure Greg has seen this. Bodybuilders, I think more so than other athletes, because it's so subjective, right? It's not like if you're a power lifter and the numbers aren't going up, you're like, look, your training is not working. Mike, like so many, surrounds himself with people that will tell him, you look great, you're in shape, and anybody that says no, he'll go, you're just jealous because I'm bigger, like he did with the BS he did with me. Yeah. Bodybuilders, my first training partner, everybody in his gym, dude, you look great, you look this, and I came in and went, your hamstrings are weak, because he needed someone. Even if people go, I mean, Mike is now apparently deleting your comments. Even if someone looked at his picture,
I told
you're
Lyle
not in
about
shape.
That.
He's going to listen to the 20 people who don't know the sport telling him how great he looks, who then go, oh man, you only lost because of politics is the usual excuse, or you're tan. So yeah, even if the internet couldn't do it because Mike won't listen, that's a him problem.
Yeah, you left a comment, Greg, on Mike's latest Instagram post. I can't remember what it was about. It was something about making rational decisions. And your comment was something to the following effect. Well, what's not rational is eating Gatorade and cereal in contest prep. It was something like that.
Yeah.
I went on Mike's post and I couldn't find your comment.
I posted on my story, so people that follow me probably saw the comment.
Right.
That's how I found out about it.
I made 3 comments on one of the RP things and they hit all 3 of them. Because Mike is apparently too weak-minded to even see my or your name at this point. This was after the guy threatened to assault me, and my name on a screen causes him that much mental trauma. So, hi, Mike. Anyway, let's move on.
Reason number 2 for why he's uncoachable. And I'd like to share my own thoughts about this one. He claims that he's both on a raw IQ scale, smarter than every coach, and knows more about physiology and body responses than they do. In Mike's view, he's smarter than Coach Greg, he's smarter than me, he's smarter than Lyle.
I'm both on a raw IQ scale smarter than almost every coach, maybe every coach. And I know more about physiology, body responses, etc. than they do in most cases.
I ask, in what exactly is this belief rooted?
Where does that belief come from? Delusional narcissism. He has to come up with, he's made up his mind. Nobody can coach me. Now he has to backdate reasons for that. But the thing is that, Greg, you know this, Solomon, you know this, people that are smart, people with a high IQ, whatever that means, don't talk about it. They demonstrate through their behaviors, through their actions, through their information, that you don't have to tell someone you're smart or funny or whatever if you actually do it.
Yes.
None of Mike's actions, none of his information that we just took to pieces, like sleep is more powerful than steroids, period. Like nothing in that shows even mediocre knowledge of physiology, much less top tier.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what exactly licenses Mike to say that he's smarter than every coach. I mean, maybe
it's delusional narcissism, just delusion.
You mentioned IQ. Maybe it's his IQ. Like he boasts about having done well in some self-administered, perhaps online IQ tests, which are basically meaningless anyway. But let's talk about that. So,
those BuzzFeed quizzes are totally legitimate. Do not, right?
I told you he had an IQ of 79.
That's how I found out that I was a Samantha. Okay, so don't diss BuzzFeed quizzes. All right, I'll shut up. Go ahead, Greg.
Well,
yeah, I'm actually more interested in why he thinks it's important to say it. Like sitting there and listening to him say it there, I'm just smarter than every coach in the world. And I'm thinking like, so Hanny Rambod couldn't have helped you. I'm like, why would you say it? Even if you believe it, is he not smart enough socially to know that it's not something you should say, that people are going to take that and be like, Like he didn't even realize that. Like that's how is he not? If he's so smart, was not smart enough to not say that?
Correct.
Well, I don't even know if he's as smart as he claims to be. He claims to do well in Raven's progressive matrices, which supposedly test how well you recognize patterns.
Nobody knows.
My question is this. If Mike is as good at pattern recognition as he claims, then why can't he identify the pattern in the way that pro bodybuilders look? That is, shredded, well-proportioned, great posing and presentation, tanned. They look a bit like you, Greg. And see plainly that he doesn't conform to the pattern. And after over a decade of competing, no less, like why can't he identify the pattern in the way that pro bodybuilders diet? You don't see them shoveling their faces with Cheerios and Gatorade during contest prep. I mean, this is a basic cognitive shortfall.
Or the pattern that he keeps making the same mistakes every prep, right? Like, look, I've made mistakes as a coach. You've made mistakes as a coach and as an athlete. That's how you learn. The key is don't keep making, at least make new mistakes. Every time I read him go, oh, I needed 5 more weeks of dieting. How hard is that to fix? Don't get so sloppy in the off season. And I don't know, start your diet earlier, right? Like anybody with legitimately a low IQ could figure that out, and he can't. But so far as the diet thing, and then I'll quit dominating the conversation, Mike has said, oh, my physiology is unique. You know who says that? People who are overweight, who can't lose weight, who think that calories don't apply. My physiology, he once said, my body holds water than other people. What does that mean, Greg? It means he effed his diuretics, right? That's always what that means. But he's like, I'm a special unique flower. Ergo, I don't have to do what literally 100% of successful athletes have ever done.
Yeah, and for him to go out and brag that he has more willpower and that he could do whatever you're best at and be better than that in a year. And so he's so good at this, but then he can't even get in shape with a GLP-1 agonist to help him control his diet. It's like you're setting yourself up for failure. Had he said, look, guys, I have the world's genetics. My appetite is through the roof. When I diet hard, I have no energy to train hard. And I'm doing the best with what I got. Look at me. I'm a 5'6" manlet with a big belly. I look like a fridge. I'm doing the best I can. People would then root for him. They would be behind him, be like, hey, you know what? He makes some fun of himself. He knows it's a joke. But when you say I'm smarter than everyone and my genetics are so good and I'm better than Mike Menser and this and this and this, and then when he doesn't come through with what he promised, which was that IFBB Pro card to prove that Renaissance periodization is the best training platform in the world, it's like you're setting yourself up for me. Basically, you're giving me a layup to slam dunk and just bring it home and say, this is ridiculous.
The best comment on the I could be better at what you do in 1 year thing was someone who said, and yet you can't even be good at bodybuilding after 10 years. And that just sums it up, right? Like you cannot claim that you could be an expert in every other field and then not be able, but like to your point, look, bodybuilding, I think more so than any other sport, is one of the most depressingly genetic sports, right? In others, you can make up for it. If you don't have the speed in the 800-meter runner, you can make it up with endurance. If you don't have the muscle bellies as a bodybuilder, tough. At the highest levels, it's just, sorry, you got stuck with the luck of the draw. If you don't have good lat insertions or whatever, I mean, at best, you can compensate with freaky other body parts, but that's life. And he is unable to, and I know you've done endless videos on that. Like he cannot accept that even if he came in as the most conditioned athlete ever, like that guy Larry Shipe I worked with naturally and he still wouldn't have the shape or the genetics. He was born with it and he never will. And there's nothing you can do about it.
As a competitor and as a judge, and I'm watching a bunch of athletes step on stage, and I know this guy, I'm like, man, if he dieted, he'd be great.
Right.
This guy, he put everything into it. Everyone can get shredded. If it's calories in, calories out. Everyone can go on a diet and come in lean. Not everyone can have big arms. Not everyone's on steroids. Everyone can come in lean. He couldn't come in lean. That's the basics. Everything else, I would argue, genetics. If he come in at 5% body fat or less and he got last place, I would say, mad respect. You put in the work, you dieted, you talk the talk. You don't have great genetics. You don't have a small waist. You don't have wide shoulders. You're not C-bum. But you freaking dieted hard and you showed that your diets work. But he didn't do that.
No.
I want to touch on something, Greg, that you brought up. Sorry, you finish, Lyle.
No, I'm done. No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, Greg, you mentioned that Mike, in a way, opens himself up to criticisms in a way that others you criticize don't. For instance, he quoted he said something. Yeah, he said this. The only reason why I compete is to illustrate to people marginally more than they would otherwise believe that the methods that we espouse at Renaissance periodization are effective. Right. Now, becoming an IFBB pro supervenes upon competing in bodybuilding. Therefore, the only reason why Mike wants to turn pro is to illustrate to people in some measure that his methods are effective. And yet he failed miserably in his goal. By his own logic, with his miserable performance in the sport of bodybuilding, he failed to prove that his methods work. Now, had he said something like, my bodybuilding success or lack thereof is irrelevant to the effectiveness of my methods, then I wouldn't be criticizing him about his miserable failure in the sport. But he opened the door to this criticism with his own words and then tried to backpedal on them with, that's absolutely not the reason why I'm doing it. She said on Steve Hall's podcast, I'm doing it for the spirit journey or whatever he claims now. Sorry, nice try, Mike, but we didn't forget your past claims. Go ahead, Greg.
All he had to do was say, I love bodybuilding. I love everything about it. I may not be the best, but it's my passion and it's what I enjoy doing. And even though I'm going to continue to fail, I'm going to keep competing because I have passion for this sport. And how do you not respect this guy? It's that easy. But when you say I'm doing it because I want to prove that my methods are better than someone else, and then you do shit, it's like, how do you cheer for this guy?
Because the simps are going to simp. I mean, the people on his wall that he carefully curates by deleting comments that are critical, they don't know any. They're just going to keep telling him how awesome he is. I mean, I did those videos on the failure thing, and I put up like 30 videos showing what it is, and his little followers were like, are you a top or a bottom? I'm like, really? Are y'all 14? Like, if you don't, can you not come back either with legitimate criticism or take my challenge, do a video all out, and you'll see that I'm right. Like, once people have attached themselves to a guru, they are not going to pay attention to facts. And nobody has a memory. That's why Solomon saves everything. Dude, you must have terabytes of saved videos. Like, the rest of us use those for personal reasons, but whatever. You do you, man. And so, yeah, but see, I'm not convinced. Mike has once said, he was just like, oh yeah, I just bodybuild for fun. I don't think anyone does competitive bodybuilding for fun. I don't believe it. Now, people run recreational marathons. They go, they do 6 hours, they get a t-shirt. People do recreational powerlifting. I think it's nuts, but they just go and they want to compete. Nobody puts themselves through the rigors of contest dieting. Nobody for fun. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. And maybe you've got a different experience, but nobody, right? Average rec person could go train, run 4 days a week and finish a marathon. Contest prep is one of the most grueling things anyone will ever go through. When he says that stuff, like this was again a couple of years ago, and he was coming in, he was absolutely not going to be in shape. And he started making pre-excuses. Oh yeah, this is, my body holds water differently. I just do this for fun. And then he took like, I don't know, fifth again. And after that, he was like, oh yeah, look how great I did. Like, dude, how weak-minded to make pre-excuses. I'm sorry, I don't think anybody does it. I don't think people bodybuild for fun. Well, they will lift weights to get jacked and look good. Nobody contest bodybuilds for fun. I don't believe it.
I guess pose for fun, but I guess pose in the shape that Mike Israetel is in at his best. That's my maintenance. That's fun. But bodybuilding, I do it because it's a challenge. I want to overcome the challenge.
Yeah. I just mean like getting into contest shape at that level and the amount of exhausting effort it takes.
Oh, it's not fun.
Props or not, I don't think anyone is going to put themselves through that for fun.
No.
Like, yes, to get into good enough shape, to guest pose, that's part of your job. That's part of who you are and like what you do. That's different, right? And even then, look at like most of the dudes who guest pose, off-season bodybuilders. They're not contest shape. I mean, they look frequently, they show up a little chunky, but yeah, again, it's just another excuse. And what has he said? There's a quote, either you said it to me, Solomon, or maybe it was Mike. Sorry, Joseph, another buddy of mine online. And Mike is like, even if these drugs took 20 years off my life, it was still totally worth it. Dude, you didn't even win the plastic trophy, right? And again, like, realize I don't like most sports, but I'm like, let's face it, bodybuilding, like, you didn't win a plastic trophy. You didn't prove RP was the best ever, because not only could you not get has he ever coached anybody to that level? right? He used that little ad hominem again. Only take advice from how someone looks or who they've coached. Like, I built champion powerlifter. I put bodybuilders on shape, but then it's like, oh, then he changes the thing. It's like, had Renaissance periodization methods couldn't get him into shape. Not even like, not saying he had to win, to your point. If he just come in shredded and the judges were like, sorry, you know, your arms are terrible, that's different. He couldn't even get there. Has he ever coached anyone to that level of conditioning? The people that follow his RP programs I hear about just end up with tendonitis because of all the volume and BS that he espouses. Like, you have to prove your methods one way or another, either on yourself or on the people you coach. I do it with the people I coach because I was a better endurance athlete. I mean, again, it's so funny. He was like, oh, only take advice from how someone looks and how someone, you know, who they've coached. Then he did his debate with you. And then he was like, oh, yeah, you know, I totally effed Greg in the A. Like, Greg has accomplished more than you have ever done as a judge and an athlete. But Mike just likes to play. I don't know. Do you coach people?
I still coach.
Yeah. And I'm sure your people look great on stage. And
I'm known for conditioning. Like, even Ian Valaire, who's an IFBB pro, said when he was amateur, I turned him pro. He was more conditioned as an amateur, eating my diet from my cookbook and everything, than as a pro.
I mean, but because
so there it is.
At least that has traditionally been the key in modern bodybuilding, right? Yeah, you got to have size and symmetry, but if you don't come in shredded and dry, it doesn't matter how, unless you're given a gift. Yeah, and I've done the same thing. Like I said, this guy Larry that, you know, we keep bringing up, I didn't coach him. I helped him towards the end to dial in the last 3 or 4 weeks. He's leaner and drier than Mike ever was, and we didn't have a GLP-1 agonist. He just did it on diet and training. So anyway, I think we can move on.
Right.
Mike,
yeah. So just
Mike.
yeah,
Oh, just sorry.
Mike.
Mike argues that the reason why there are good coaches isn't because they're good coaches, because they got lucky. So he says that the right athlete, the specimen, comes along, and that's why they're good. So Danny Rambon isn't better than Mike. He just happened to get Chris Bumstead, Derek Lunsford, Samson, whoever it is that he's happened to have coached.
And I don't think he's entirely incorrect in that once you are a successful coach, you do tend to draw people that are at higher levels, and success does breed success. But that's still an excuse, right? Even if Harry got, well, fine. Go let him coach you and see what he can do. Because clearly Mike hasn't even gotten lucky as a coach or as an athlete. He's failed on both counts. So that's just another one of his dismissals because he can't address the actual issues. So I think there's an element of truth to that, but it's still an excuse. Rambot had to get somebody in shape the first time, and it wasn't just sheer luck. Maybe his future athletes, because like, oh, this guy's a good coach, I'm going to go to him. But still, Mike proves that you can't polish a turd no matter who your coach is. And I know 2 of his coaches, so ex-coaches.
Yeah, right. All right. So to wrap up our thoughts on the second, I mean, yeah, we'll move on to the third reason he gives for why he's uncoachable. But just to wrap up the second reason he gave, I think based on the available evidence, it'd be unlikely for his IQ to be any higher than room temperature in Celsius. But we know that he doesn't tell bold-faced lies, right, Lyle? Anyway,
oh no, never. Never.
Reason number 3 is that on high doses of anabolic androgenic steroids, it becomes, and I quote, maniacally fun for him to resist the coach's demands and pick holes in their protocols, ideas, and arguments. It becomes, and I quote, pleasant for him to watch them intellectually break down and be unable to justify anything.
When I'm on high doses of anabolic steroids, I become very disagreeable. And so it becomes very, how do I say this best? Maniacally fun for me to resist the coach's demands and be very cynical and skeptical when they ask me to do things. And so that when I ask them questions, well, why did you say this and why not this? It becomes pleasant for me to watch them intellectually break down and be unable to justify anything.
Given his psychological comportment and attitude with his coaches, Greg, in your expert view as a pro bodybuilder, is he really on the relatively modest doses he claims to abuse?
I've only ever seen 1 or 2 individuals that I could say have that kind of talk that are that like far off the wagon. And one of them, I said, he wanted to win really bad. And he said, Greg, give me the highest cycle that you could ever do. I'm like, all right, I don't recommend it, but I'm going to tell you what I'm on exactly. The highest cycle I'd ever done. He followed it, did the show. He won the overall. After the show, he says, Greg, I just doubled everything you told me to take. So whatever I took, he doubled it. I was on high doses. He sounds more like this guy. And so when I hear that I'm on 5 milligrams of Halo just at the end to just get hard and 100 milligrams of Tren and that's it, I'm like,
Oh,
I think that's his daily dose. And I just don't understand what he's talking about. Like, I don't understand because he's never shown his blood work, of which I've challenged him to show the blood work. He's on all these other medications to combat his high blood pressure and so on. And he acts healthy. He acts like he's doing it in a healthy way, which I don't believe. I think he's on more drugs in the off season than he would claim to be when he's at his highest doses.
I would have sworn he once put up on his Instagram what he was using, and there were 6, 7, 8. I could be wrong about that because people send me this stuff, and I'm like, oh, okay. Occasionally, pros will put up, here's what I'm taking, and it's like, yeah, it's about 3.5 grams a week, which is probably still moderate in modern era. But yeah, there's no way. I mean, again, I know one of his ex-coaches. I mean, I could find out, and I guarantee you that's what he's claiming. I think Mike defines, well, there's a couple things as far as the drug doses. Again, I'm not a drug coach, right? This is me knowing enough to be dangerous. Duchenne years ago, I remember they tested the Olympia like back in the 1990s, and everybody looked terrible. And Duchenne once wrote, he's a buddy of mine and a mentor, said, that's what I really learned, how many mistakes in diet and training the drugs were covering up for, because people had forgotten how to get into shape without them. So I think Mike clearly does that. It's like, because he talked about, I've got my new magic drug, and he went on retatrutide, which is a powerful appetite suppressant, raises metabolic rate, maybe a little bit. Like, sorry, Clenin T3 is way more potent and way cheaper. And he's like, this is good. This is this. And it's like, yeah, and you still couldn't not eat Captain Crunch post-workout. Like, clearly it wasn't like he thought that was going to be the key rather than figuring out where he's effing up his diet and his training, because he is. Like, you see his training. This is the man that says only take advice based on how big someone is, and then has the goal to go, yeah, I don't think Dorian Yates did enough training. Like, you can't have it both ways, Mike. You can't say, size and physique determines knowledge and then go, yeah, I think I'm smarter than Dorian or Mike, both of whom actually, succeeded. But so far
Mike
as
Mentor, you mean?
Yeah, sorry, Mike Mentor.
It's a bit confusing
when
I talk about both of them.
Yeah,
anyway.
Sorry, yes, about then Mike Mentor, who like put them side by side, and there's no question who was the better bodybuilder. What was the original question? I've totally forgotten what it. Oh, his doses, his inability is like. Why? If you're an athlete, if you want to succeed, and if you hire a coach and realize that as a coach, I tend to be dictatorial is the wrong word, but let's say that athletes don't get an opinion for a couple of 3 years. In the same way that when I heard my coach, I knew more than him about a lot of things. And I shut up and listened to every word. What did I know about ice speed skating that a guy with 27 years of experience, multiple Olympic trial athletes, multiple Olympic athletes, who the hell was I to tell him his job? Now, 3 years later, I got opinions. And if he said no, that was it. Why would someone who wants to be successful go out of their way to hire an expert and then argue with them and get joy from being like, nope, that's why your protocol is wrong? Like, well, gee, Mike, if you do know so much, coach yourself and get in shape. Can't do that. If you're going to hire an expert, shut up and listen to him. But Mike's like, I have a PhD. I wrote this book. I'm the expert. Well, then coach yourself, and we've seen the results. And that's why he's uncoachable. Fundamentally, he would hire a coach because he's done it. Ignore him or listen selectively, and then blame the coach when he fails. I've known athletes like that all the time, and it's always the same psychology, and they can't be helped. So you just fire them because it hurts your reputation in the long run.
Yeah, good. Anything you want to add, Greg?
Not exactly on that, but I mean, Mike should just show us his blood work. I mean, if he wants us to believe that he's healthy and if he wants to coach all these people, because he gives the illusion of health by saying, look at my blood pressure. It's from taking blood pressure medications. You're not healthy. He's 5'6" and 235 pounds. It's like you're pretending you're healthy. Then you're saying that when I try to sell something like progesterone, that I'm a snake oil salesman because it's fake and all this, even though we proved it's real. But he can say whatever he wants, but if I say, show me your blood work, he just, no. And everyone's going to say, well, he doesn't have to show us your blood work. Well, Is he not selling us a program that's supposed to be healthy for you, that works, and that he gives the illusion that he's healthy? Wouldn't you want to know that he's 10 years away from a heart attack? I would.
Well, I mean, how many years did he be like, oh, it's the training, it's this, and just, oh, special sports supplements? He didn't want people to know that every ounce of muscle that he has comes out of a needle. And you and I both know it. I mean, fine, maybe he was decently built. I don't know when he went on drugs, but I suspect it was at a very early age because he's just got that personality profile and he had to protect himself against the bullies when he was 14, which he's also talked about. But it's like, but he wanted, even now I see, you know, ads for the RP app and they have him or one of the other juiced up guys are like, do you want to train like me? It doesn't work without drugs. It doesn't. And I'm, you know, we could talk about that too. And I mean, I will admit, even when he was like, Lyle's criticizing my training. No, I'm not. I'm criticizing your information. Like, stop lying. The way you should probably train when you're using is very different than you would train as a natural, right? You don't add what you don't try to, because you get hurt, right? I know that much. And like, yeah, his training was appropriate for the grams of gear that he's supposedly not on. And if you're working with natural, that's why his training doesn't work for naturals, period. Doing 32 sets of
Did you see it did work though? He coached Tristan Lee and he put on 35 pounds of muscle in a matter of months from being a 22-year-old. I mean, he put 25 pounds on in 7 years. And then with RP, with Jared Feather, which is RP, they had a big thing. And he says, you know, I can tell he's natural. He says, I've been far around pharmacology for a long time. Tristan Lee's natural. He put on 35 pounds in 22 weeks.
Oh yeah,
okay,
that's totally.
Well, there you go. That's cool, but I'm a snake oil salesman, but he can say, Tristan Lee's natural, he trains with us, and he put on 35 pounds in a matter of months when he put 25 pounds in his first 7 years when he had newbie gains.
Yeah, I think he's natural. He's natural the way Mike O'Hearn is natural.
Exactly.
Which is only, which is using semantically. Well, testosterone is natural, so testosterone from a needle is also natural. It's that logic. Yeah, because, you know, whenever guys have suddenly gained more muscle total than any natural ever has and does it in either that or he's in one of Jacob Wilson's studies, which is a reference nobody will get. Anyway, let's move on. Yeah, Mike is, I mean, sure. He's a consummate snake oil salesman. He just is. And this industry is unfortunately.
Yeah, you raised this, Lyle. Mike has stated that the only reason why Greg does what he does is to make money. And you mentioned that, well, for a narcissist, every accusation is an admission. You wrote that in the comments section of the interview Mike gave, in which he stated that he was uncoachable.
Yeah. But
I also want to comment on, does
Mike work for free? Do I work for free? Everybody does this to make money, right? Like, how can you be seriously that, you know, this is the guy that says getting rich is a virtue. It spends $250,000 on a gym that still hasn't helped him, and you're just in it for the money. That's like when holistic people, what's his name, the quack, one of the alternative guys who's like, oh, big pharma's only in it for money. Like, dude, you sell light bulbs for $80 a piece because they're magic. Like, that's not, unless someone is altruistic and doesn't charge. But again, it's just a dismissal. He can't address your facts or my evidence or anybody else's facts. So the thing is that his idiot followers will be like, yeah, Greg's just in it for the money. Yeah, that's why Mike works for free, moron. But
yeah, I mean, you mentioned his dismissals.
Yeah.
If I may, Mike describes his critics as unintelligent when it comes to the criticisms we've voiced of his failure to fail in the weight room. For those who are unfamiliar, when you take a set to concentric muscular failure, with very few exceptions, the rep velocity drops. Mike is questioned about that on this podcast. His response, my critics are unintelligent.
You do not train to failure because your rep speed is not slowing down.
Those people are just not intelligent.
Well, that's absolutely. That's a legitimate scientific response from an exercise scientist who criticizes Dorian Yates. Oh, they're just not smart. And yet every study that's ever been done on the topic that a supposed exercise scientist should know about shows exactly that happening, right? But again, Mike can't address the facts, so he just goes with the ad hominem. Well, they're just not smart. Well, if we're not so, people play this game against me all the time. Lyle sucks, he's this. I go, fine. If you think I'm wrong, If you truly think I'm wrong, prove me wrong. Don't just tell me, like, it should be, these guys, I'll put a challenge. I go, look, if you want to prove me wrong, do this. And nobody steps up. Why? Because if I thought you were wrong about something, Greg, and I said you're wrong, and you said, fine, prove it to me, I would jump at the opportunity to prove it. If I had, whether it was research papers or whatever, something in the gym, I would jump. And none of these people who talk crap, with one exception, little Milo, charisma void wolf, that's a whole separate story. Not a one of them. They just block me and continue to talk crap. It's that simple. I told Mike, all you got to do is one all-out set. That's it. One all-out set to prove me wrong or disprove me, or prove me right. He spent 6 years talking about it instead of taking 2 minutes to do that set. That's
well, Mike places a camera and strategically ready for him to throw up. And then people even argue me, he trains hard. Didn't you see him throw up? And I'm like, I mean, how do you plan something that much? And he screams a lot, but is he really training that hard? I mean, make fun of it that he's training at level 4. He's screaming. Looks like he's having an orgasm at 4 in the morning or something. But it's like, he doesn't train hard. 10-pound dumbbells like this. Yeah. 10-pound dumbbells. There's no way that's hard. I don't care how many reps you're doing.
I mean, and that was just it. I never said, like, you can do like high rep, short rest, and that's hard. That's got nothing to do with it. But like his whole thing was like, Lyle thinks I'm not tough. And this, like, no, what's your, like, Jesus, oh God, I just don't even know where to start with all that. But it's like, I didn't say he didn't train hard. I was never criticizing his training. That was one of his many straw man deflection lies. I'm saying you're not anywhere close to 0 reps in reserve. Then he was like, well, technical failure and capped rep speed and all this other nonsense. And I put up a video a while back of him taking some power lifter through a set. I forget who it was.
Yeah.
Chris. And the guy did, the leg curl. Yeah. And at 8 reps, Mike's like, good. And then Chris does 8 more. And it's still, I'm like,
7.
That's what Mike thinks is 0 reps in reserve. At the time I did my video series, he was putting up all these videos, bicep workout to 0 reps in reserve. My issue was with, like, that's not. What you are showing is nowhere close to 0 reps in reserve. I don't care about how you train. I never did. But he couldn't address the facts. He won't show you the blood work. He just goes, you're just stupid and in it for the money, because that's the best he can do.
Yeah.
Like most con men.
Just to change the topic, let's talk about Mike's decision to keep attempting to earn his pro card after all of his catastrophic failures. I find it ironic how Mike makes a big song and dance about how he tries to make rational adult decisions. I ask, is megadosing anabolic androgenic steroids and being morbidly obese in your 40s in a futile effort to get an IFBB pro card really a rational decision? No. And all 3 of us have argued that independently of each other. Now, Mike is really hoping that the rate at which medical science is advancing is such that by the time he'd have otherwise faced serious health problems from his lifestyle choices, there will be a medical intervention that fully heals him. I really hope he's right about that, because if not, then he's completely stuffed. I ask, why would a rational person take that risk?
Because
if things in the future, right, will be as great as Mike claims they'll be, then why wouldn't he do everything in his power, starting yesterday, to live long enough to see the future? Well, my explanation is that fundamentally Mike isn't a rational person, which is why he doesn't make decisions like one. Go ahead, Lyle.
My explanation is different in that people define rational by the choices they've already decided to make. We all think we're being rational, even when we do moronic stuff. We all conclude after the fact that was a rational choice. And athletes who want to reach the top are not rational, in the sense of, as an outsider, that we would look at that, right? There was that famous study that maybe never got done, and they asked Olympic athletes, you take a pill that would guarantee you a gold medal but killed you in 5 years. And they said, half of them said yes, right? And they were absolutely convinced that it was a rational decision, because people define rationality after they've made the choice. Objective, someone in my group the other day was just like, oh, I know this person and they're using cocaine, and what research can we show them to change their mind? I'm like, you're kidding, right? I'm like, they've made up their mind. Like, they know the risks. We know the risks. Nobody doesn't know the risks. They've already justified it, and they've already rationalized why they're going to do it, because everyone around them does, and it's good for work. And, oh, I'm not an addict. That's the classical one. Everyone thinks they're different. So To you, it's a rational decision because you can sit and go pros and cons, good and bad. But to someone who wants to reach the top, the only rational decision is to do whatever it takes.
Greg?
I think that Mike is just too young. Like, we see him as a mature, or perhaps not mature, but a smart 40-year-old man. I see him as like a 22-year-old who just thinks he's smarter than he actually is. And so think of a 22-year-old that's taking steroids and is just like living in the moment for now, the dopamine rush, the thrill, the chase, all this stuff, wants to prove himself. He hasn't got the maturity to understand the mistakes that he's making. And so when an old man like me, I'm 49, pushing 50 keys a Turk across the border. But when he looks at me, he doesn't understand that I'm older and I've been in his shoes and I know what he's doing and I see the mistakes he's made. I abused steroids for 10 years. I wanted a pro card. I got the pro card. I wanted all these things. And so I've been there and I made the decision and I can look back on it. It took a while before I regret it and thought, why would I risk my health? It took me a while, and that's an educated person. So I don't think he's matured long enough or thought about it long enough to realize, how is it worth trading 20 years of my life to chase this dream when I'm not even good at it? It's a dream for a reason. Dream about it when you're asleep at night. Don't make it into a goal.
Well, and now, Solomon, you're not typical, right? You're not a typical individual. But whenever I see, what is every parent? Oh, I can't believe my teenager's doing this. You mean the same stuff you did? Why won't my teenager listen to me? Because you didn't listen to your parents, right? Every time I see an athlete or someone in the adult industry and they get chewed up, they go, I got to keep 18-year-olds from going into this. Why? You wouldn't have listened. Why do you think they unfortunately, every one of us has made bad relationship choices. We see someone we like doing it. We tell them not to do it. Sorry. Most are not going to, and yeah, it comes down to maturity. And then we get older and go, damn, I wish somebody had told me that when I was 22, and we wouldn't have listened either. And expecting the average person to have that level of maturity is absurd, right? Every parent who thinks that, like, I'm not going to tell my kid not to wear that. Like, yeah, what did you do? You snuck out and did it anyway. And so are they. You want them to not do it? Tell them you think it's awesome, or dress like them. And you have to unfortunately learn the hard way. I think it reminds me actually of that video you did about Izzy, where everybody was telling him that, dude, you're hurting yourself. You're tearing your joints up. You're killing yourself. And what did he do? Rationalized it. And in his opinion, he was making a rational choice. Everybody thinks they're being rational, even if the rest of the world says they're not, it's because they're haters. Because that's what people do. They're jealous. They only want to make money. Whatever their decision is made, the explanation comes after the fact.
And frankly, I think I'm lucky that I stopped. Like, I was abusing steroids, and then they invented a new category, men's classic physique, of which my weight cap was significantly lighter. And so I said, I'm going to go into that. So all of a sudden, I don't need to abuse steroids anymore, because if I do, I will be too big for the category. Then I got in several bike accidents, tore up my arms, and I'm like, I'm going to not bodybuilding and get my dopamine from other sports where I'm maybe not as good, that require you to be fit. So now I ride bikes. I only lift weights every 3 or 4 days. So I'm so much healthier now than I was. But if I hadn't have gotten to those accidents, if they hadn't have created men's class physique, I'd probably still be pushing for the Mr. Olympia. Oh my God, I'm almost 50. I'm going to go for the Masters Olympia title. More trend. And then maybe I'm dead at 50. So maybe these broken elbows saved my life. You never know.
Yeah. Well, I think you had the advantage, because C-Bum has at least made noise about wanting to, to come off, and he's like, he doesn't want to keep abusing high doses because of his health, and I think he has got a family, like, long term. But it's like, the difference is you got your pro card. You're like, okay, I've done what I came to do. Yeah, there's always that dream, maybe you can get to the top. But going back to Mike's thing, the reality in most sports that people don't want to hear is that for 99% of people, if you're not pretty damn close by year 3, you're not going to get there. But Michael Jordan, don't focus on the exceptions. Don't focus on the fact that Bill Gates dropped out of high school. Most high school dropouts are working at McDonald's right now, right? Like, if you're, same thing with every 50-year-old guy, dude, this is the year my band is going to break. You've been doing this for 30 years. And if you haven't broken through, you're not Guns N' Roses. You're not going to. You got your pro card. Dorian won 8 Olympias. He did get injured, and he's like,
6.
I can't break. What? Are you sure? whatever, 6.
Yes.
Right. And he got injured and he's like,
92 to
what,
that. Yeah.
whatever. We can argue whether or not that final one was a gift, but he said, I can't bring my best anymore. What has he done now? He's in his 60s. He went off all the drugs. He lifts, he does yoga a couple times a week. He's super healthy, had his injuries. That's, you know, the nature of the sport. Then you look at someone like Ronnie Coleman, who he's just broken. But the difference is you succeeded. Dorian succeeded. Mike still thinks. He still thinks just a couple more years. I just need the right lateral raise machine. I just need the right new drug. And even if he did, to your point, even if he came in ripped and dry to the bone, he doesn't have the lines to do it, and he never will. Although I have a belief about that. We'll get to that. We talk about the actual coaching of him. But,
yeah,
you know, and people keep encouraging him.
Yeah, go on.
People keep encouraging him, right? Like there's that whole thing online. Oh, you know, don't hang out with people that tell you to not follow your dreams. And I think that's terrible advice. If I knew someone after 10 years was never going to make it, I go, you best stop following your dreams and go do something real with your life, right? When Sumi had hit a point, there was a couple of years, I'm like, I don't know if I can take you any further. And then she broke through. And then a few years later, I'm like, look, you've done everything you came to do. You've got other reasons. And she retired. And I did the same thing with sport. At 42, I'd done everything I wanted to do. I couldn't get any better. And I retired and never looked back. Mike still has that belief, like every 50-year-old guy playing to 12 people in the bar. Yep, this is the year. This is the year I actually get 100 streams on Spotify and get that 1,000th of a penny.
I just want to mention briefly, Greg, I really admire how candid you are about your regrets going enhanced. When you disavow the abuse of anabolic androgenic steroids, there's a degree of sincerity that's totally absent whenever Mike Israetel does it. You know, ever since I posted my video, I've been getting comments like, however bad Mike is, Greg is worse. Because, you know, you have haters. So you shouldn't associate with him. And I completely disagree with those comments for a number of reasons. So I'll speak in your defense. I think your overall message is a good one. Stay natural unless medically indicated. Do your cardio. Train harder than last time. Because fact is, most people don't train hard enough for the results they want. You know, you call out charlatans and fake naturals. That does enormous good. You know, flexible dieting. Don't get sloppy in the off season. You communicate in simple, straightforward English. You don't try and confuse people the way Mike does. And I admire that about you. So anyway, just wanted to throw that in.
Well, the funny thing is people hate on you for speaking, which is what's harder to do. It's actually harder to be honest with people and tell them hard truths. And like you were explaining with the what was it you were saying? It's harder to tell somebody to give up their dream than to just say, go for your dream. Sure. It's harder for me to say in a video, your physique sucks. You shouldn't be doing this. That diet sucks. You're overweight. You're going to die. That's so much harder than just saying like, be you, body positive. Sure. All these things are easy. You're just appealing to people's emotions. I'm trying to speak fact, and facts don't always say nice things.
Okay. So Saul, let me ask you a question. When people say Greg is worse than Mike, do they expound on that? Do they explain? Do they give it, or do they just go, "Oh, Greg's worse"? The end. Like that's not an argument, right? Like, do they give actual reasons why Greg is worse than Mike?
I mean, it just comes back to the usual stuff, like the snake oil salesmanship and whatever. But
yeah, Mike is nothing but honest. Yeah, sure. Okay.
The snake oil thing is, I'm so happy this has come up because I had for years being this horrible snake oil salesman, all to do with the turkesterone, that they didn't have the proper testing back in the day. The FDA accredited testing wasn't proper. You needed a mass spectrometer to do the testing. And so then after that, I found actual turkesterone from Uzbekistan, and I keep selling it. And I had it tested by multiple people. And I had other people's stuff tested, like Gorilla Mine and whatnot. And I knew they were selling fake turkesterone, and I didn't say anything because I'm like, if I out it, people say, oh, you're just doing this because you're trying to win the competition. So an independent party does it, test 10 people, my leading competitors. I'm the only one with the Turk. And not only that, the only one with the actual plant that it's in, Ajuga turkestanica. And so I'm vindicated right now. This 2-hour podcast will be on January 7th, but I've already posted clips. And so I'm not the snake oil salesman, but everyone else is. I do not see Mike Israetel saying, Derek, Speak to this. Gorilla Mind, all these other companies. What about you guys? Greg has proven himself beyond reasonable anything that he's not selling snake oil. You guys haven't, but I'm still the snake oil salesman, despite the fact that I have the receipts that I'm not.
But and again, I've dealt with this my whole career, right? I'm disliked for many reasons. Most of them, some of them are legitimate, and I'm okay with that. But people be like, oh, well, Lyle said this 15 years ago. Well, okay, I also wrote a public apology many years later for a lot of those things. And trust me, I'm perpetually embarrassed by the things I said when I was younger. Yet, in saying that I made a mistake, people will weaponize that against me. Oh, well, Lyle's been wrong before. Mike, and never admitting he's wrong. Like, you get held accountable if they don't like you for doing. If they like you, the people who like me are like, yes, I like the fact that Lyle will admit that he's wrong. If you don't like them, they weaponize that against you. Like they weaponize the mental illness stuff, like all the bags. Like Menno Henselman, by the way, if you ever get to Austin, look me up, buddy. I'll see if you'll say that shit to my face.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, let's not. Yeah, sorry. I always like to point out that I criticized one of his articles once, and his immediate response.
Just one.
His immediate response was, "Are you off your meds again, you bag?" Like I said, if you ever get to Austin, let me know. I want to see if you'll say that to him. But like, because he couldn't address the criticisms. Now, at the same time, they won't hold the people that they like to a single standard, right? Someone can say something about me that is a provable lie, like what Mike did. I can disprove that, right? He said, Lyle advocates training to failure for all people. 6 videos, I flat out said I'm not advocating that, and they will believe a provable lie. But if I say something that is a provable truth, I have to provide 3 references, endless evidence, and it'll still be dismissed out of hand. So again, they decide who they like first, and then they work backwards. Like Brad Schoenfeld can make up any excuse, any BS that he wants. Oh, I don't have to blind people. I don't have to blind because you can trust me. Oh, come on. If anyone else said that, you would absolutely trash them. When we brought up that he forgot that he didn't declare his conflict of interest, like, well, it didn't change the nature of the studies. That doesn't matter. It's the rules of science. And as people are like, yeah, it's okay for Brad to do it. Like, I don't care that I'm held to high standards. I try to hold myself to higher standard, hold everyone else to the same, like they do with you. They're going to hold you to this standard when you can disprove their claims about what you're selling being snake oil. And they won't hold anyone else to the same standard. It's not the standard that I have the problem with. It's the hypocrisy. And I'm sure you have the same issue. Like I said, people hold me accountable for crap I said 15 years ago, and they won't hold the people they like accountable for anything. Anything. It's a good thing I'm not bitter about it. Let's move on.
Sure. We raised earlier that Mike kind of just doesn't have the genetics to do that well in the sport of competitive bodybuilding. In his critique of Alan Ritchson, the actor, he mentions that it's a bad idea to beat up your health just to look eh.
Why are you beating up your health to just look eh?
He claims, and I know you've talked about this, Greg, that he went about the abuse of anabolic androgenic steroids the okay way.
There are a few ways you can go about doing drugs. I went about it the okay way.
I mean, no. I would argue he went about it one of the worst ways imaginable. But this whole thing about beating up your health just to look eh, isn't that precisely what he does?
Well, me, frankly, a lot of people say if you're going to be a pro bodybuilder, if you're going to be a bodybuilder, that gives you an excuse to use steroids. I see no extra reason to use steroids to win the Mr. Olympia than to just look good on the beach. I'm kind of, I don't know if anyone agrees with me that. I think that the guy who's a 2 out of 10 body who wants to be a 4 out of 10 has just as much reason as the 8 out of 10 to be a 10. Like, you want to look good on the beach, you're sloppy, whatever, and you're taking steroids to look average at best. I used to sell steroids. Like I was convicted. Like I'm a criminal. Like it's not like I'm making some story up. The majority of people that I sold steroids to, you couldn't tell they were on steroids. They looked natural because they looked horrible because they wanted to look average. That was the average person. Their wives, they wouldn't know about it. Their girlfriends. It's like they just wanted to impress somebody. And I'm like, I get it. Just as important as that guy that wants to win that trophy, he just wants the wife to look at him and be like, you look good. or to get a girlfriend for the first time. These are just guys who just want to look average. And so when I go in a gym, I can't say, oh, that guy's on steroids. Yeah, some are obviously on it, but some guys look horrendously bad and are on everything.
Well, I think the data actually shows like the majority of people using anabolics now don't compete. They just want to look buff. And that's a legitimate goal of training. Like I said, I don't want to quibble about like, I'm agnostic about the drug thing. Like, hey, yeah, if you want to use 150 milligrams a week, that's safe, provably, whatever. And if you want to be a little bit better, but it's not going to make you, it'll take you, as the elite fitness guys used to say, right? There's, crap. It's not what they use. Crap, suck, good, great. Most people might get from crap to suck. I say the same thing about all these training things. Like, okay, let's say squatting 6 days a week gets you 5%, or say 10%. Let's be really optimistic. That takes your squat from a whopping 225 to 245. Hooray, right? I'm sorry. Now, when you're squatting 900, even though Ray Williams squats once a week, and forget all, same thing with if you do 52 sets a week, you'll gain that extra 0.5% over 8 weeks. Then you get tendonitis and get hurt. Like, great. You still suck. Like, and sorry, nothing you can do is going. And like, to your point, people don't like to hear that. When I talk about genetic limits, people get really, really angry because they don't want to believe, especially in America, good Puritan work ethic. Just got to work. You don't know my work ethic. I don't give a damn about your work ethic. And yeah, I do, because I've seen how most people train, and what you're doing is not going to get you anywhere anyway. But all the work in the world will not get you past your genetic limits, because that's what a genetic limit is. And face it. So look at Dorian 6 months into training. He went from this skinny little punker to he was already great. Look at, for example, Nasima Inyang, and I really hope I'm not mispronouncing that. He was one of the few guys.
WAF world champion.
Yeah, but you look at him when he was 15, and he was bigger than most dudes you and I could go into the gym and see today busting their ass. Even the whole thing about, Ben Johnson sprinting, like, look at him as a teenager. He was already muscular and jacked. He just became a more jacked version of himself. So, yeah.
Look at Greg Doucette when he was natural.
People would say, why did you go on steroids when you look like that natural? Because I had a better physique then than now. But I'm like, I was also 30, not 50. And I wanted a pro card. I mean, I won the drug tested national champion. I won the world championships. What else could I do? But I wasn't big enough.
Well, I mean,
so I went on steroids to get a pro card.
I mean, to your point, you said you don't think at this point, this is 50-year-old Greg Doucette. You're 50, is that what you said? This is not 30.
I'm 49, yeah.
Whatever. I'm 54, so I'm older than you, almost you two put together. Not 30-year-old Greg Doucette. You looking back, and you said you don't think going on steroids is worth it even for the Olympia. And I would disagree with that in the sense that it is a necessity if you're going to approach that level. Just like if you're going to, in certain sports, like the only way to succeed, if that's your choice, is to use drugs. Now, again, we can quibble about all the other stuff. There's better and worse ways, but you accept those consequences, right? Every guy that becomes a boxer accepts the possible consequences that they're going to end up like Muhammad Ali later in life. Every American football player knows that being 400 pounds as a lineman and doing that is probably going to kill them young. The difference in my mind is that football player got paid $20 million a year. Muhammad Ali is a legend to this day. And I'm sorry, but nobody gives a crap that you won your pro card. This isn't aimed at you. This is me outside of our weird little subculture, outside of Arnold Schwarzenegger, maybe Lou Ferrigno, maybe a couple, 3 guys. The average person couldn't name a winning bodybuilder if you paid them. They could name a lot of football players. They could name Shaq, Michael Jordan. These guys got paid millions to destroy their bodies. And I'm sorry, look, I love powerlifting. I love coaching it. I love the big picture. Nobody gives a damn. Not in the general public. Like, you'll oppress people in this little weird subculture. But yeah, it was part of your goal to get an IFBB pro card. Factually, you could not do that without going on anabolics. It's just the nature of the sport. It is an unfortunate or a whatever. It is a requirement. And you did what you had to do. The difference was after you got to the point, you went off. And I imagine, and maybe 32-year-old Greg Doucette wouldn't have done this, if after 2 or 3 years of that, it was clear that you weren't going to get there, you might have had the sense to stop, because at least that's what should happen, right? If you've been beating yourself, your head against the wall for 5 years and you're still nowhere close, you're not going to get there. Period. You're just not.
I think what I'm trying to say by that is not that they have a reason or not. It's more like the guys who are trying to be pros, who are trying to be the best in the world, are thinking, yeah, but I have an excuse. They're trying to convince themselves that what they're doing is okay. But the skinny guy shouldn't do it because you're just trying to get an average physique. And I'm like, the guy wanting to get that average physique in their heart of hearts wants it just as bad as I wanted that pro card. I just want a girlfriend. Like that. That's all I'm saying there.
No, I don't disagree with that whatsoever. I think we're quibbling minor points. But I think the other difference in your case was you'd already won a championship as a natural. And this is something Solomon brought up with me in that 14-hour podcast we did. And maybe this can lead us into a discussion of how we would coach Mike before this runs 4 more hours, did I think that part of Mike's problem was that he never learned to get in shape without props? And I don't know. I've looked at his old bodybuilding pictures, and if you look at his earlier things, he looks like every crappy amateur bodybuilder. Wasn't that he didn't have abs, he didn't have ab, right? And like, this is something I always wondered about bodybuilding. I know I jump around a lot. Like, okay, you can go to a marathon.
Sean Stoner remarked that his abs look like the tire marks of a crime scene.
Nice. In other sports, you can go and just have fun. If you want to go squat 95 pounds and feel accomplished, cool. That powerlifting is great like that. Other sports are like that. But to a point Solomon brought up, if you were a bodybuilder, and this is even true back before the internet, back during the magazine days, right? You are some rando bodybuilder, you want to compete. You can look at the magazines and go, okay, that's what I need to look at. And you can look at the mirror and go, yeah, I don't look like that. There has the disconnect, right? Then you go to the competition, right? You're backstage, right? Everybody else peels down. They see you, they see Larry, and then they look at themselves and go, I don't look like that. At what point and again, it's because they surround themselves with people in the gym that just blow smoke up their butts and they don't want to believe it. They think, the last couple of weeks, I just need to manipulate my water, whatever. Like, but at some point, like and in the days of the internet, there is no excuse. There is no excuse for not knowing exactly what is expected in every division, at every level, and every sport. But you already had won a championship, learned how to get into shape, learned how to train, had the lines, had the ability, whatever, that you could actually move up. And I genuinely wonder, I don't know that, like, and I guess we can quibble, like, do you need to know your body better than anyone like Mike does before you go on to anabolics? You'd be able to answer that better than I could. But I suspect a lot of people that reach that top level, they train naturally. They see where they are. I knew a guy years ago in Salt Lake. This is just a funny story, and I'll let you talk. And we got to talking, and I was like, why do you use? Just because I was curious. And he goes, well, I hit 198 naturally. I was winning shows, and I realized I was at my limit. And he goes, it wasn't that he wanted to be unnatural. He's like, I wanted to be supernatural. And I was like, that's the best answer I've ever heard. He knew that to get to his goals, he needed to be 220, and he couldn't, but he was already perfect shape, great lines, B taper. It was already all there. Rather than using drugs to cover up what he didn't know how to do, he used it to literally enhance what he already had. And I suspect that's what you did.
Very rare would I have coached anyone who would have been at anywhere near their genetic potential before they started. Unlike myself, as long as I was improving, that was the name of the game. I really enjoyed improving. I trained for over 20 years before using steroids. I did 42 shows natural. Damn. 42, it's a lot. Yeah. That was it. And then I continued to compete, enhance, and it allowed me to keep extending that enjoyment of bodybuilding and having that challenge. It wouldn't have been fun to keep competing at the same weight in my 30s. So I went on steroids and boom, it expanded my career for another decade. But
yeah, I mean, that
was
was again.
People I coach, they were on steroids within 3 years of training.
Right.
And 2/3 of the people I coached were not natural. And I wouldn't share their secrets. Most people were on steroids. Most people could have done it natural. I would have preferred they were natural. Most people do their first show on steroids. They don't do a natural show first. And that's just what people in general are doing. Like, just look at the Trent twins. They could have competed natural, but they didn't.
Become so much more normalized in the internet era. I've got someone I know they were training this teenager, and 16 is like, what do you think about Trent? And it's like, are you out of your damn mind? Because you go on TikTok and whatever, and these guys are just like, yep, I've been on Trent since I was 17. And it's like, oh, okay, that's not good. That's not good at all.
You mentioned, Greg, being on steroids into your 40s and 50s, and I'd like, before we talk about how you two would coach Mike, to talk about Mike's vacillations to do with whether he will or won't continue competing in bodybuilding and attempting to earn his pro card. He states that, health permitting, he's almost certainly going to come back to bodybuilding. Why? Right, so for context, after Mike's recent catastrophic showing at a relative nothing of an amateur bodybuilding show where he placed 7th in Masters 40 Plus, he announced that he was going to step away from bodybuilding for the next few years to focus on his content creation. Mike states that he doesn't care about the money he's making from his incessant stream of unadulterated BS, which he posts to social media. He claims to do it primarily for the benefit of his viewers. In Mike's view, he's an altruist, except his advice is dangerous, irresponsible, and lacking in scientific support, which I went through in exhaustive detail with Lyle.
Yeah.
There are a number of things we can talk about there. We can talk about his bad advice. We can come back to his bad advice later and talk about his will I, won't I compete vacillations now. What do you think?
What do I think we should talk about, or what do I think of Mike and his competing?
What do you think of the vacillations? The changes,
let's
his mind back and forth. Yeah.
I mean, Mike said he's going off steroids because he wants to be healthy, and he says, I'm going to downsize, and he gave us a warning in advance. I'm going to be around 185 to 200 pounds, a svelte Mike Israetel. He competed at 217. So I said, okay, he was probably on really high doses. He's going to go natural or low dose HRT. His weight every week went up till he peaked at 237. And so I argued, is he up? I showed him saying it. I'm going to be 190 pounds. I'm downsizing for my health. He got bigger. So he's lying. I mean, so what's the point in taking anything he says at face value?
Oh, no, I can tell you exactly why he got bigger. He got more sleep, because sleep is more powerful than steroids. Period.
That's it.
Yeah,
it's all muscle. It's got to be all muscle.
He added an hour nap every afternoon, and that was all it took to be more anabolic than a gram of gear a week.
This is his direct quote, if I can remember. An hour of extra sleep that brings you from sleeping 2 hours fewer than you need to 1 fewer than you need is unreal powerful and comparable to tons of anabolic drugs.
Sure. Oh, I mean,
how do you argue this? He said it, so.
I mean, look, he's got a god tier IQ and is smarter than all of us put together, because we're not very intelligent. So who are we? Who are we to criticize the man that thinks pot isn't ergogenic?
And he studies AI. He's got artificial intelligence on his side too now. He's got ChatGPT.
Well, there you go. Which, yeah.
He's a philosopher, an economist, a political theorist in his own mind.
You forgot he knows about relationships, immigration laws. What other things has he decided to opine on? I made a mistake. I got opinions on a lot of things, but I know that they're all uninformed, and I would never have the gall, to make a YouTube video about any of it. But I think with that, he's trying to develop his own channel separate from RP, that for reasons that can't really talk about. I don't see any reason for that, because those are on his own channel, such as it is. My opinion, as far as the whole vacillation, is like, I don't believe for a fact Mike could ever downsize. He has bigorexia. Right? Remember, Greg, you did a video about bigger is not better, because it's not. And
he admits to this in his last video that he posted yesterday afternoon.
Oh, did he? That he's got that? I mean,
yeah, he's got a 13-minute and change video admitting he made 5 mistakes.
Have you read through the comments, Greg?
I laugh. I read 20 comments during my response. It was so funny.
The climate is definitely changing. I know Lyle had for the longest time a doomer mentality as regarded critiquing these big figures on social media. And for a while I was sort of thinking, yeah, he's kind of right every time, because I was a pretty early critic of Mike Israetel's. I was making videos before everyone jumped in. You know, oh, he's advised that natural lifters in the general population should probably train more than the IFBB pro bodybuilders that they follow is asinine. That is an asinine claim, and he didn't substantiate it with any sound argumentation or scientific evidence, right? And all of the comments I got in response to that video at first were, Mike has a PhD. What do you know? You're small. You know, I'm natural as well, but they didn't address the actual substance of my arguments. But things are changing now. Since, you know, your videos, Greg, and since my takedown, which you promoted, Greg, that I did with Lyle, the climate is changing. People are seeing Mike for what he is.
Yes.
So I hope you feel vindicated, Lyle, because you were a little kind of, even in the podcast I did with you, you were sad about the state. You were like, well, you know, people are probably going to see this and just side with the guru, because that's how it always goes.
That's what I've dealt with for 30 years, and realized that, yes, there are a number of people. However, I guarantee you, because especially now that he's deleting comments, like a true coward, right? That is the true sign of cowardice, you know, or deleting an entire video like the lifting dermatologist or the other guy who called us names. Like, nothing is more gutless, right? If you're not going to stand by your words, don't say them, and don't try to make
I would pin the comment.
Oh,
if Mike made a point that got me, I would pin his comment to the top and say, good one, Mike.
I do the same.
I would,
exactly.
bravo.
Yes, exactly. Bravo. But I'm sorry, you're not very intelligent, doesn't qualify as that. But the problem, so there is a larger relative percentage who's seeing through it. And I guarantee you, Mike will simply carefully curate his Instagram and YouTube to keep the people that, because if you do, it's great. When I criticize the other people in this industry, the best way to win an argument is to not let anyone see the valid criticism. Brad, and seriously, the entire circle jerk. Mine's actually, I will give Mike credit. He hasn't blocked me. That surprises me. I mean, he's hiding my comments now, but Schoenfeld, Krieger, Eric Helms, Lane Norton, all those cowards, right? Because the easiest way to not have to address legitimate criticism is to make sure your people never see it. And eventually, if this goes away and people stop bringing it, you know, the new crew, every 3 years, a new group of people enters bodybuilding, and they won't know that Mike, and they'll fall for it. That's the way the industry has always been. So
yeah,
I like that everyone, you know, there's been this current pile-on, and I like the fact that just as it's starting to slow down, we're going to release this, and we've made it cool to point out all of Mike's BS. And I mean,
you touched
proportionally, more people are realizing it, but he'll just wait till everybody forgets.
Yeah, I just want to say, as regards the low caliber of the supposedly evidence-based people in this industry, exercise science is a fascinating field, but generally the talent goes elsewhere. There are exceptions, but if you're smart enough to study, you know, biomedical engineering or physics or maths or whatever, then why would you pick exercise science as your chosen field?
Okay,
you know, I mean,
as someone with a degree in exercise science, I will of course take issue with that. Yes, it's a field that it used to be PE coaches, right? It used to teach you originally exercise, you know, you learned the rules to basketball, and then they decided we're going to make this legitimate science. And my mentor, who was an engineer who studied rocks, thought it was a joke based on the research. And then 30 years later, I don't know that he was wrong, but there is a very low bar for entry. It's people like me. I was interested. I was an athlete. I wanted to learn more about that. And eventually, the reason I developed my career, I was trying to make myself better. So I went and studied that because it was something that I wanted to do. So, however, we are now also in a position that to get a PhD means nothing. It means you have 5 years and some money, right? Brad says that his PhD came from a university with an online component. Well, being who I am, I went and looked through the entire 4-year course schedule for the exercise science PhD because I'm a little nuts. I'm a lot nuts. In 4 years, it required like 20 total hours on campus. It's not an online component, Brad. That's an on-campus component. It's an online degree. I get served ads on Facebook. I'll get them now. get an online PhD from a bunch of teachers no one's ever heard of. You know, I brought up Milo's, the university he went to, ranked 125 out of 126 in his area, right? It is not, and they're just like, I've got a PhD, and yet Milo doesn't understand that height and muscle size are not the same characteristics in his wonderful little. So yeah, but then you have the problem that the people who are in the field, who are doing research, or the actual coaches, they don't have time to be on Instagram all day or post 4 trite pieces of crap. But even with that, right? Blame me or credit me. I started, like, I was the guy who created the online evidence-based fitness industry. 1993, I was there. I was the first guy. Into the 2000s, and I was the only one for like a decade. And nobody wanted to listen. Oh, you're just a lab coat, blah, blah, blah. Okay, into the 2000s, that's when all these guys started to show up. Alan Aragon, Eric Helms, Schoenfeld, Krieger, Lane, the new crop. Most of them have said, when they're being honest, like, they're like, yeah, I came up reading Lyle's books, right? They wouldn't say that now because they're all mad at me because I butthurt them over stuff. And originally, they wanted to help. They were like, we're going to, you know, help defeat the bro science and all that stuff. And then over the next 10 years, as the saying goes, you either die a hero or become the villain. They all became exactly what they used to. And I don't know if they bought into the hype. I don't know if they realized it was more money in being a guru, but they all became what they used to criticize. Every single one of them. Okay, that's not fair. That particular group. There are folks outside that group that they don't do what I do. They don't bother tying themselves up with this BS. I do because I'm bored and I enjoy it. So they all became, over about a decade span, they became what they used to criticize.
I just want to state very briefly for clarification, when Lyle's referring to Brad, he's referring to Brad Schoenfeld.
Yes.
Which the RP Hypertrophy app website describes as, whom the RP Hypertrophy app website describes as the undisputed world #1 expert in muscle growth. I don't know about undisputed.
Yes, they called him the greatest hypertrophy researcher in the world, despite the fact that his 17 studies were unblinded and terribly done. And he misrepresents data because that's, I mean, whatever. He gets interviewed by major magazines, major podcasts because he's better at marketing. He's better at marketing than he is at his craft. And that's very common in this industry. I think it's universal. Milo puts up 4 videos a week and 87 shorts every single day. He's already got 100,000. Why? Because he's better at social marketing than his job. I'm terrible at, social media. Terrible at social media because I'm too busy like improving my craft. I've got this crazy thing where rather than read marketing books or how to game social media, I'm like, you know, reading research and trying to improve my knowledge base. I know it's a crazy thing, but it's just, yeah, I watched it develop and it makes me sad because it could have been, you know, could have changed.
I want to ask
world.
Greg a question.
Yeah.
If there's no input of your own you'd like to offer on that, Greg, I wanted to ask you, how would you coach Mike Israetel if he came to you and paid your, how much is it, 36,000 US dollars?
39,000 US dollars.
39, there you go. Even higher.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people give you shit for that, but like,
I think it's well worth it if you're actually, I mean, of course I do, but you know.
But also, like, your time is very valuable. If people want you as their coach, they're gonna have to. You know,
I mean, I charge 750 US for 40-minute phone calls and 500 for 20-minute phone calls, and so if you do the math, it's not that bad. And the people that I actually help can afford it. When you make $20 million a year, they don't really care about $39,000. So some people make a lot of money.
How would you coach him if he actually came to you?
Well, the first thing I would want to do is to actually see his blood work, and I would actually want to know, what do you really take? That would be like really what I want to do. Then I would say, Mike, you need to stay so much leaner in the off season that it's not going to be that hard for you to get in shape. Like the key would be, I don't want you so heavy. He's already too heavy right now. And then I would make him diet so much longer than he thinks he needs to diet so that I make sure that he's in shape along the way. And every week I would say, have you made progress or have you not made progress? And if he didn't, we would either, and I would give him the choice, Would you like to decrease calories or increase cardio or do a combination of both? And so essentially I would coach them in the exact same way that I coach every single person I've ever coached, by asking them the questions, what way is better for you? I don't care if you want to do more cardio and eat more. I can do that. You want to do an hour cardio a day? Do you want to do 90 minutes of cardio? I can do whatever you need, but I want to make them enjoy the process. But the key component is you can't start prep when you're obese.
Yeah. Great advice. Some people charge you a lot for that.
Dude, when I do my
Mike
consults, it's a lot of it is just telling people what they already know.
People pay you a lot for that advice, is what I meant to say.
Well,
Sorry.
but
yeah,
the
go
thing
on.
is, but there's a logic to that, right? Free advice is what it's worth, and a lot of people don't take that seriously. Someone that's going to pay you $750 most likely is going to listen, because otherwise, I mean, there will be people that won't, that think that paying the money is all they need, but they're the ones that want to listen. Right now, there are exceptions, right? There are people in my group usually. Again, I know I keep bearing up Larry's name. I didn't charge him, but I wasn't doing much. I was just being like, I just need you to do this, and we'll do a couple things to make sure we hit peak week just right. And I'm like, and I don't claim to have coached him either, but by and large, when people pay money, they're probably ready to listen, and that's important, or ready to make some change. Not always, but I occasionally do consults. One was like, I love hard diets, but they never work for me. And I said, so don't do that. And that's why I get paid the big bucks, to tell people what, but they need to hear it from an outside source, because they don't trust themselves to be objective. But I spend a lot of time, what have you done before? I mean, again, this is Gen Pop, right? What's worked? What hasn't worked? That informs what we're going to do going forwards. Someone breaks on extreme diets, well, we're going to have to raise activity, exactly like you said. Some of it's preference. At some point, something's got to change. I agree with everything you said. I think we talked about that when I talked to Solomon, right? Don't get so sloppy in the off season. If you do, you got to start 9 months out, right? You got two options, and if you start leaner, if you start at 12%, I would still start a month earlier, because as you well know, you can always slow down a prep. If someone's ahead, you can always slow it down a lot more easily than you can speed it up. I mean, it can be done, but the person's got to be willing to suffer. Like I said, protein sparing modified fast, my RFL. And the fact is that someone like Mike doesn't have, despite his greater willpower than any human being in the universe, doesn't have enough willpower to cook tilapia and chicken breast every night. God forbid he actually have the willpower to cook, or God forbid use all the money that he doesn't think because he's not a con man, to just hire a meal prep company. For God's sake, this is not difficult.
Is he that?
That's
crazy
baffling.
where he can't spend his money. Like, I watched him with his mansion. I'm thinking he probably makes more of the money than me, which is a lot of money. And I'm like, there can't be a possibility that he can't afford actual chicken breasts instead of chicken thighs, and that he could actually somebody prepare him a meal that would actually taste good. Like, what is he doing with his money? He's got to be making millions, like so much money. Like, I don't get it. Why doesn't he have a meal prep person? Because he don't get it.
Because he needs a new lateral raise machine, because with only two, he can't possibly get the delts that he needs. And because
he should be able to afford a new Lamborghini every single month. I don't get it. Because if he's making any kind of money like I make, the guy should be able to do anything he wants. Like, does he need a yacht? Like, I don't get it. Does he need, like, he should have Lambos for his butlers, as he says. I think he could afford it.
Oh, he could.
If he doesn't have 10 million a year, I would be shocked. If he's not making 10 million a year, then he doesn't know what he's doing.
Mike reminds me of this athlete I knew in Salt Lake City who wouldn't show up to training, wouldn't warm up, wouldn't cool down, but would spend $1,500 on custom boots, because that was clearly what was holding him back. And he wanted to go to an outside strength coach because that was clearly what was holding him back. Mike will not spend money on what matters, but he'll spend it on retatrutide, a drug that clearly still wasn't, enough. Like,
it's a GLP-1 agonist for those who are unaware.
It's a GLP-1
basically
agonist.
An appetite suppressing drug.
It may raise energy expenditure. We can do a GLP-1 thing separately. Like, but again, he's convinced himself, well, I know my body. I know I can get it shape on protein bars wrapped in tortillas, for God's sake. And, Captain, a big bowl.
Like, who coached him? He was having like 800 calories of cereal
Well,
every day, and Gatorade. Like, who coached him? Did he coach himself?
No,
Well,
look, it's public knowledge who his
we
coaches
know.
were.
Was it
Yeah.
Jared Feather? Like, did he?
No.
More
So-
recently, Jared has been coaching him.
Not exactly. So
Just
In the
his
podcast
posing,
he
maybe.
did with Jay Cutler, with Jared admitted
Well,
to having coached
okay.
Mike.
So he used to work with Broderick Chavez, who's a buddy of mine. And Broderick has mentioned, right, like until Mike started working with Broderick, Mike looked, believe it or not, even worse than he does now. Like, I realize that's probably hard to believe. Like, Broderick at least turned him into what we would consider a bodybuilder. However, and he worked with him for several years, right? Now, said Mike is the type of coach, and I know for a fact type of athlete, and I know for a fact that this is what he did. Mike selectively takes advice because he thinks he knows better because he's a God tier IQ expert. He hires a coach. Duchenne used to write about this. Duchenne wrote, I prefer coaching women.
You know Dan Duchenne, Greg?
Of course,
yeah.
Of course, Greg knows. He's old like
Of course,
me. He
Greg
knows who
knows
Duchenne
Dan.
is.
Yeah.
And
Didn't have
Duchenne
to
said he prefers coaching women because A, they don't need as many drugs, but B, they'll actually do what you tell them. It's like men will do other stuff and then lie to you about it.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, no
More
matter
so.
what Broderick was telling Mike, Mike was only listening to what he wanted to listen to, right? Like this athlete, this skater I knew, he would only show up for the workouts he enjoyed. That's Mike. Right? He would only, so then that went on for a few years and I don't know what happened because I remember a couple years ago and Mike was like, I'm going to a new magic diuretic coach because clearly, you know, he's that guy who's like, is it fat or is it water? If you don't know the difference, it's fat. It's really, they want, you know, the magic water pill. Clearly he just needs the right diuretic protocol. And I don't know who that was for sure. But I know that he has recently worked with Joe Jeffrey, who's another buddy of mine. And again, this is not, if this is secret knowledge, I don't think that's the case.
It's not.
And again, I guarantee you, he is listening very selectively. And what I have been told, because again, I don't follow the internet unless it's sent to me, any of this stuff. I watch We Rate Dogs and music and video game stuff. Apparently for his next contest, and I actually want a thought I had about why he's returning that I didn't express. He's apparently going to be working as a team with Jared and someone else. And here's what's going to happen. Jared and Joe will give him advice and he'll only listen to what he wants to listen to because he's the expert and he knows better than all. They're not coaching him. They're part of his team. And he's going to do the same thing as always. And he's going to look just as bad. He's going to make the same excuses. And we're going to have content for the rest of our careers. Now, going back to the question you asked, and then I'll be quiet again because I'll give some thoughts on what I would do, although it's very similar to what I think Greg would do. Why is he returning to bodybuilding after he made this big to-do about it? In my opinion, I say with smug little bit of egoism, and I think you'll agree, it's because of our video. We made him look bad to his followers. And now he's got to come out and prove us unintelligent, jealous, snake oil salesman haters wrong. And it's going to be the hubris. Well, the others too that have piled on, but mainly us. Oh, the hubris. Oh, it's going to be delicious to watch the exact same thing happen again. And we can reconvene and go through this again and again and again. And every time, because this whole thing about quitting, he's like, well, you know, done what I wanted to do. No, you didn't. You failed repeatedly. Although someone in one of my videos was like, Mike's not a failed bodybuilder. He won some, you know, BFE nothing show one time. Yay. It's like being the best bodybuilder in your living room.
Did he?
And
I don't think he's won a show.
someone said it would have been early. I mean, I will go.
Hitchens razor, what can be asserted without evidence can be
Yeah,
dismissed.
I
without
don't know. I'll go on to his comments. I'll be like, Mike couldn't win a show if he was the only one on stage.
Yeah.
Like, and I do. Like, I think here's what's going to happen. He's going to do a master show with 3 people and go, I took 3rd. I've proved myself. Like, he's that guy. Or the guy that's the only person in their class. Like, I won my class. He's the exact kind of guy that would do that. But the other thing I would say in terms of how I would coach, but that's why I think he's returning. He's got to prove the haters wrong. Okay, cool. We just get more videos out of it. Works for me.
Yeah.
So far as how I would coach him, on top of what you
we
said.
used it last time.
Yeah, don't get so fat in the off season. If you do start your diet earlier, stay in shape. I mean, what I would do is I wouldn't, right? I don't know, like if he said he was going to throw all the money at me to coach him, I wouldn't, because I don't coach pre-failures like that. And I'm not saying that, like I do. I only want people that are willing to listen and work and do the work. And like, you know, I've mentioned Sumi Singh, the power, like like I said, I'm very dictatorial until about year 3 or 4 where she got an opinion on stuff. But it's like, he would just say, well, you're just lucky. You just cherry pick your athletes. No, I developed her from nothing to a world champion. She was not good to begin with. And she had a terrible squat. And one of the first things I told her, because I'm honest, was you're never going to have a great squat. I go, you'll have a good squat, but you'll never have a great squat. Your deadlift, on the other hand, is going to be epic, right? My mom was a piano teacher. If 3 years in, she would tell them, look, you can have fun, you can be good, but you're never going to be great, because that's the only honest thing to do. And I would tell Mike, you don't have it. You don't have the lines, you don't have the genetics. On top of now maybe if he came in ripped to God and so conditioned, maybe he could shock the judges into overlooking his vast deficiencies. Maybe if he learned how to pose, and he said that he doesn't care about posing, which is hilarious. How can you not care about one of the key components of your sport? That's just that's just ludicrous to me, right? That to say something.
So much for giving it a professional effort, which he stated.
Well, and that was because the guy whose name you said, and I won't even attempt to recreate was Brazilian. I don't want to get this wrong. Was like giving him comments and trying to help him with his posing. I was like, I don't even care about posing, and here's why your posing sucks, because he's an infant, right?
He says he can't hit the front double biceps pose the way most people can, because it puts him in excruciating pain unless he hits it the weird way he does.
If you notice, my right arm in a front double bicep stays much more tucked in than my left. My left can flare. My right can't flare. If I try to flare my right, I get excruciating pain in my glenohumeral joint.
Jesus Christ, the pre-excuses are just amazing. But what I think, because I know you did a video on this, the bigger is not better thing. And there's a bodybuilder in the 90s, and I forget his name, and he looked like a rectangle, and I forget who it was. And
Dave Palumbo?
No, I mean Palumbo did too. It was someone else, and I forget who it was. And even like, because I start a lot of videos.
Refrigerator with veins.
Get bored. And even the commentators are like, look, he's got everything, but he's got to narrow his waist, because he was too big. And as I like to point out,
Greg Kovacs was like that.
Yeah, it was somebody that actually did pretty well and then just decided to get too big for. And as I like to point out, Mike wants to be too big for how short he is, because I know he's real sensitive about his height. Why do you think he does his videos like this?
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
It's because it makes you look taller.
With the big man executive chair.
Yeah, exactly. So he can look taller.
We're actually the same height. I met him in person. He's exactly 5'6". I'm 5'6". I don't exaggerate my height. I don't exaggerate anything. I'm
surprised he's that tall, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I thought he was going to be shorter than me.
Okay. So Greg, what body weight did you compete at your peak?
My last show, my biggest, I was 195, and when I was classic, I was 185.
Exactly. I am of the
light heavy's 198. He could cut to 198, eat after he weighs in, and be 202 on stage, and be way better than he is now.
You beat me to it. That's exactly. I forget. I probably said that in Solomon's video, and a video I never finished. I was going to say that same thing. You look at, say, like Franco Colombo, who's 5'5". At 185, he looked amazing.
Yeah.
I maintain that if Mike would get over this, because didn't he at one point be like, I want to be up at 260? Like, dude, you already look like a rectangle, right? Somebody, again, the buddy of mine online took a picture of Menser and Mike.
He's gone as high as 250 while on gear. Yeah, anyway,
right.
Mike Menser.
Right, Mike.
I'm so glad, by the way, that I brought that I'm bigger and stronger than Mike Menser claim to the internet's attention. That was me. I found that. Stuff. Yes,
but showed them both doing a back double bicep, right? And Menser has this beautiful V taper, great lats, insertions. Mike's taper looks like the letter T. It's just, right? His back double bicep, he looks like a T, because he's got no waist. He's got that bubble gut for whatever reason, which he says, oh, it's genetic. My parents, when some people called him out on being fat on the hack squad, he was like, oh, I've got interior
From a
bubble.
lot of drugs.
Genetic. It's
lot of
like,
drugs.
no, and you don't know how to diet or have good TVA control. Like you need to figure out. But I maintain it's funny you beat me to it. If he would cut down to a lower body weight so that he actually had a waist, had a taper, had the X shape, I mean, it still wouldn't make up for his biceps insertions. It still wouldn't, but then you might at least be able to see his lower lat insertions, and he might be able to get lean and conditioned enough to at least have to blame his tan. So that would be the other big one.
Yeah. That's a pretty comprehensive analysis of what you two would do to Coach Mike. May I voice one of my personal biggest problems with Mike Israetel in general, as regards his general influence in the online fitness sphere? You can let me know your thoughts when I'm done. One of my biggest problems with him is that he takes the term science, which is near and dear to me, and basically uses it as a smokescreen for bullshit. Like he emblazons all of his training videos with scientific training for muscle growth. Like the RP motto is, if I recall correctly, science is stronger. Yeah. My grandparents on my dad's side were both organic chemists. They were actual scientists. My grandmother was the first woman to earn a chemistry PhD at Melbourne Uni. I've been surrounded by actual scientists and PhD doctors my entire life. I know what it looks like, and it doesn't look like Mike. To be honest, it looks more like Lyle. If Mike's advice and practices in competitive bodybuilding were actually scientific, then I wouldn't have a problem with him using the term. But his content is pure slop, which makes his use of the term science egregious to me and an abuse to the field of exercise science. What do you two make of that?
Greg?
Well, I agree. He uses science because it caught the algorithm. So it's like exercise scientist critiques. It hit the algorithm. Once he was able to get like a banger video, like 1 million views, then what you want to do as a content creator is keep that going. And so by putting that in the title, it reaches a search engine for anyone that's was shown that video, and then they do it in the next video, the next one, and the next one. So he saw a way to get very popular, and it worked, and he went with it. I don't blame him for that, but is it because he actually cares so much about science? He thinks he's better than everyone, that he's trying to help the world. I'm helping millions of people so bad. He's convinced himself that he's got this, I don't know, this virtue signaling that he's just better than everyone else, but he doesn't realize that he's doing exactly what he critiques other people of doing.
Sure. Well, like I said, with narcissists, every accusation is an admission. Everything he throws at everyone else is about him. Lane does it too. Just like, I don't want to get into politics, but certain individuals that are high up in our current political climate, same thing. Whatever they say about someone else, it's really about them. Now, I saw this thing with science. This has been a thing on YouTube. The best biceps exercise with science. That became a thing for a while because people were like, we need to, you know, we can't just show the science like I do, like actually putting, or Solomon does by putting up, you know, quotes from the studies, and here's the references, and here's the links, here's the physiology, go check it out. Rather than just showing it, they have to tell you that is for the algorithm. And whatever, YouTube is what it is, and now you have to do what you have to do. But the problem is that nothing he says is science. The other problem being that, and this is true of the entire evidence-based group that I've mentioned, to them, it's all about the science until the science is wrong, which is when, until I show them that the science says something different. And then they're just like every other bro. Lyle's an a-hole. Lyle's this, Lyle's that. Oh, you should only take advice. So in one video early on, Mike said, oh, you know, there's some big dude in the gym doing full range laterals. You shouldn't just listen to the biggest guy in the gym. We go look at the science. All right, fine. I don't disagree with that. Then I go, Mike, this is what the science says about rep speed and 0 reps in reserve. You should base the advice on how big somebody is. Then he argues with you. You're bigger and more accomplished than he has ever been. Oh yeah, Greg's still an idiot because he's whatever dumb nonsense he used to dismiss you. And he's like, oh, exercise scientist. I don't think Dorian did enough. Seemed to be all right. I mean, the math I work out, okay, Dorian trained 4 times a week and won 6 Olympias. If he trained 8 times a week, he would have won 12. I mean, that's just how the math works, right? Right? Mike is like, if you're not doing 8 training sessions a week, you're not training enough. And yet natural should do more than the pro. Like, there's no consistency because it's whatever he says at the time, I think he truly believes at that moment, because that's what narcissists do. Whatever today's lie is, he truly, and I put up an Instagram once about the sleep thing. And I was like, when you wake up and try to figure out what lie you're going to tell people today, because that's where it comes from. There's no rationality to it. And it's science until it's not science. Lane did it with me about metabolic damage.
Yeah, I think
anti-guru, like, and then you bring the science and it's like, nope, F you, you're this, I'm that, I've got a PhD, blah, you don't even do research, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I don't like the bro argument. I'm bigger than you, but at least it's consistent. At least those guys won't change based on, like, do I agree with it? Not really, but at least the others are just hypocrites. And that's my problem.
Yeah, totally. Before you go, Greg, I just want to remark briefly how funny it is that Mike is at once the exercise scientist who says, don't listen to the biggest person in the gym, and also the guy who says, I'm bigger and stronger than Mike Menser, hence I'm more of an authority than him. Your physique reflects your knowledge, Lyle, hence I can dismiss you and I'm more knowledgeable than you.
And yet, Greg's
whatever works for him at the time.
Whatever works for him in the moment.
And yet,
it's entirely ad hoc. He has no principles.
Sure, but the thing is, his followers can't see it. You could literally put up every single example in a row of, like, he said this, then he said this, and these all contradict one another, and they would just go, you're just jealous. Like, you can't, because they've made up their minds, and they will rationalize the decision after the fact. And I don't know why, although I think part of it, they don't want to have to admit that they backed the wrong horse. I think that's why they get so angry at having the truth of their guru pointed out. The cognitive dissonance is massive. Occasionally people will come up to me. I'll get PMs and they'll be like, yeah, I think you were right about Brad's paper. And I'll just go, of course I was. Like, you asked me.
It takes a while for that paradigm shift to change. There, you need almost this major event where enough people finally speak out. Then all of a sudden, wait, now it's cool to
and that's what's
with
happened.
Mike. Because for me, for a long time, it's cool to pick on Greg. Why? Well, I do natty or not some people. I call people out. So it's cool to shit on me because, well, I call out a lot of people. And so I get that. And at least I'm fine with it. I'll defend myself. I'll argue, whatever. But what happened to Mike, it's like, no, it's not fair. Like, Mike thinks everything about me is what it is to himself. And I've tried to have conversations with him on the phone. He refuses. He wants anything I say to him in writing. I can't get through to him. But I think what he thinks is that I'm
his
him.
coaches can't,
so when he analyzes me from the perspective that he thinks I'm him, but I'm not.
Yeah,
so he thinks when I do something, I'm conniving and it's planned out, and I'm like, bro, I'm just sitting here having a debate with you 4 years ago, hung over on the beach. There's nothing more to it than that. Like,
oh, his analysis of that debate is so funny. He's still seething about it. Oh, Greg used manipulative tactics. He was a dick in his videos, and then he played nice in the debate to confuse me and make me behave more aggressively, which made my demeanor off-putting.
Look at when we did the
like,
volume
no,
debate.
you were just being you.
when we did the volume debate, I didn't cuss once. He did the entire time, and I'm convinced he was trying to get me to break. He was saying, you can just see me during the whole thing just going, because he was trying to get me to start raging and ranting, and I'm like, nope, not going to give him.
He was yawning dismissively while you were talking about your
but I'm
mum
not going to
being
give him the
a concert
benefit
pianist, you know.
to do. But yeah, now, like I said, to your point, Greg, now it's, because I've seen people go like, oh, it's just, the wolf pack. I had people come at me and they're like, why are you doing this? I go, because as a buddy of mine put it, he's a cancer on the industry. Is it not my job? Is it not your job as someone who wants to help people to demonstrate why am I the bad guy for pointing out how full of shit he is, or you? How come we're the bad guys for pointing out that the advice he's giving you, the information he's giving you is either bad, dangerous, or wasting your short training time, right? I do wonder, all the people who listen to the whole failure thing, who spent 5 years thinking I was wrong, now you see in the comment section, again, going to being vindicated. Everyone's like, wow, Lyle was right, wasn't he? I'm like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
It takes about
And-
5 or
and-
10
and-
years for
yeah.
everyone to come around and realize it. I'm like, do those people, they should be angry. Mike was so sociopathic about not admitting he was wrong that he wasted 5 years of their training because it was more important to him to keep lying to them. That's why I do it. That's why you do it. I mean, also you're a snake oil salesman, but it can be two things. It can be two things. I mean, everyone like me, like, well, you just sell books. Yeah, I sell books about diet. I'm criticizing Mike's training, so that's got nothing to do with it, right?
Yeah.
But even so, like, you just do it for the money. Yeah, why Mike has a mansion. Anyway, I'm done. Greg, final thoughts? Solomon?
Yeah, just briefly. If you look at the comments, if you saw it by most recent, or even just the top comments on the volume debate video, it's all just, with hindsight, Lyle has been vindicated. Look at Mike yawning performatively at this timestamp. What a jackass. It's just stuff like that. So anyway, Greg, go ahead.
I have nothing to say. We've covered it all. I think at this point, if you don't believe us, well, you're not going to change your mind.
And I would only add to that, yes, if you can look at all this evidence and all these facts and all my videos and all your videos and all of this, I mean, it's easy to dismiss me. That's why I like that other people are piling on. You just go, hey, Lyle's an a-hole and he's small. Well, you're not. You're not FBB Pro. There's all these other, like, you can't dismiss them for that. Come up with a better reason, right? If these people can truly look at all these facts and evidence and not change their mind, they can't be helped. That is a them problem that you and I, we can only help who we help. And hopefully some percentage of people have realized that, he's smelling, there's only one real snake oil salesman here, and that's Solomon.
What?
No, sorry, Mike. Mike Israetel. Sorry, Mike Israetel. Sorry. Little slip there. Cool, guys.
I want to ask one more question in closing.
As bad as me.
How screwed are you is my question. In terms of how much sleep did you get last night? Because if you're not sleeping more than the pros, then you're not going to build any muscle because it's the most anabolic. Me, I got, I think, 4 hours of interrupted sleep last night. I woke up at 2 a.m. I was intending to wake up at 5 a.m. for this. Because we started at 6 a.m. nice and early. How about you, Lyle? How much sleep did you get?
I couldn't fall asleep till 2, and I'd taken antihistamine, which just wrecked me. I hate it. But Greg and I are both old, which means we get up every 2 or 3 hours to pee. So at least I do, right?
I bet you guys are busting.
Oh, it's awful, man. It's
benign prostatic hyperplasia.
But so I only got 6 last night, and I don't know. I feel smaller. I feel like everything's just like what little muscle I just feel like I shrank.
It's over for me.
I was on an overdose of caffeine for a video that I made.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned.
I didn't sleep a lot, but I slept 7 hours. The first with marijuana induced from an edible, and then the final 4 from
the best
Zopicone.
nootropic.
The best nootropic, yeah.
I was just wired.
I'm so sorry to prolong this, but are you aware of that video that Mike posted and deleted where he's interviewing someone named Jake Benson about whom he describes as a super expert in brain enhancing drugs, and he's just some, like, I don't know, roided powerlifter, and they're talking about taking cannabis edibles as supposedly brain boosting substance. I mean, what?
It's certainly not brain boosting anything.
He took that video down, but I ripped it and posted a critique of it. It's very funny. So you have my permission to. Anyway, that looks very academic. Oh, hello! Look at that bookshelf.
Sorry,
are you in?
I'm
who's the real snake oil salesman? How'd you afford all that?
If you go to the 3 dots, there's there's an apply visual effects, and I'm just goofing off.
Got it. Yeah, Janelin, what an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, it was great.
Man, I should have been playing with this the whole time.
Yeah.
Oh, for real. This is awesome. Okay. Well, cool.
Thank you, Greg.
Guys, thank you so much. Good to finally have Greg. I don't think we've ever actually interacted, so it's good to finally get to.
No, it's great to chat our first time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a hot topic.
Was great to chat to you, Greg. I echo that same sentiment.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Okay, well, we'll talk to you guys all later for sure.
All right, Greg. Have a good one.
Thank you.
All the best.